Hello wonderful listeners, welcome back to the More Life Less Drama podcast. I'm your host Prue, and today's episode is a powerful exploration into a topic that resonates deeply within my mission, inspiring inclusion on International Women's Day. In a world where every woman deserves to be heard, valued and celebrated, we're diving into the heart of change. Today I'm not just talking about breaking down barriers, I'm actively building bridges towards a more inclusive future. So join me as we discuss challenging stereotypes, fostering positive visibility and celebrating the incredible achievements of all of us women in all walks of life. It's more than a conversation, it's a call to action. So whether you're on your daily walk, driving to work or simply unwinding at home, let's dive into this empowering journey together. This is not just an episode, it's an invitation to be part of the change we wish to see in the world. Without further ado, let's kick off this very special conversation on International Women's Day, and be sure to share it with a friend if you are so inspired, and let's get inspired and make a difference. Are you ready? Let's go. G'day! Hello everybody. Well, today I'm doing something different, and that is I'm recording with video as well as audio. So if you're listening to this podcast on the podcast app, you can now find this podcast episode as a video as well, and I'm going to be streaming it on YouTube. So if you're a person that likes to watch video opposed to watching audio, well, YouTube might be the place that you go and listen to this episode. Otherwise, I'm still here on the podcast and I'm just going to be doing exactly the same thing. The only difference is I have to do my hair and make myself look presentable instead of just like rocking up in my pajamas, which, you know, that might be a bit of a lose-lose situation. But anyway, so we're back, and today, the day that this podcast airs, is the 8th of March 2024. And this day is also special because it is also International Women's Day. So today I want to celebrate all the incredible women I have in my life, and all the women on a personal level that I have in my life that make me show up as a better person every day, because there's plenty of you, and if you're listening in, you know who you are, because I most likely tell you, because I'm that type of person. It's also about the women that I'm looking up to from a distance, so the mentors that I have online who know me and also don't know me. So it's definitely in dedication, this episode, to every woman who is showing up in their life and wanting to be better and do better for themselves and also for society and for the world as a whole. So a big shout out to every single woman who is just showing up in the world and making a difference. And look, if you're thinking to yourself, but I'm not doing anything, I'm going to tell you that you are. You're just showing up, doing your everyday things like I've talked about in many podcasts, but particularly the last couple, about being extraordinary just in ordinary circumstances. You are also making a difference, and I really want to shout that from the rooftops, because I'm sure nobody tells you that. And I'm the person that is going to tell you that. I'm the person that is going to say, hey, you are doing a bloody fabulous job, keep going, and to never give up on yourself. So I'm here for all you women. The theme for International Women's Day this year for 2024 is inclusion. And in this episode, I'm going to dive into some pointers for inspiring inclusion, and firstly, what inclusion even means. And this episode's also about challenging gender perspectives and gender stereotypes and discrimination and bias. Then I'm also going to share some personal experiences with you, because I know people love that about this podcast, that I can share real life experiences. And as a self-proclaimed ordinary woman, I want to share my experiences because it helps everybody else feel that we are connected in some way, not doing this life alone. And then I'm also going to, at the end of this podcast, leave you with some intentional thoughts to practice so you can continue on the journey. Because you know me, I love to think intentionally, and I love to change our belief systems one thought at a time. And yes, it takes time, but it also takes practice. So I'm going to give you some, I think there's 4 prompts that can help you move through this journey and move and shift your belief systems and your perspectives about this topic, because it's a big topic. So firstly, we'll start at the very bare basics. What is inclusion and what does that even mean? And I'm going to put it in the context of International Women's Day. For this conversation, inclusion refers to creating an environment where every woman feels valued and recognised and has equal opportunities in all aspects of their life. That is inclusion. It's breaking down barriers, it's fostering a sense of belonging and ensuring that women are treated as equal partners in their homes. Yes, we're starting at the very basics, which is in their homes, in their relationships, in education, and in their careers. Inclusion emphasises dismantling gender stereotypes, and it's about promoting diversity and empowering women to thrive without facing discrimination or bias. It seems like something that should just automatically happen, but unfortunately, it's not. And as a woman, I want to stand up and say, this is not okay and this has to change, because I would be doing an injustice to all the women that have come before me that have fought this fight. And if I was to stop right now, that's the injustice I would be doing them. All the women out there up until this very moment who have really put in their heart and soul to change these stereotypes and to change the discrimination that they have had throughout their lives and have overturned a lot of it. And think about just the basics, like women allowed to vote. That was huge. And if I was to stop now, it's not okay. So the generation that we are in, it's really important that we keep going with this fight and keep talking about it and keep understanding how we can change and do things differently in our world as it presently is, so we can continue the change. I want it to filter down to my children, like my daughters and their daughters and their daughters if they have daughters. It's bigger than ourselves, and that is what keeps me going. And I hope after this conversation it will highlight what will help you to sort of step into this journey as well. So backing back a bit, because I did get sidetracked. So how and what does this mean? When we are looking at breaking down these barriers, well, it means that whatever role a woman plays, be it in their home life or their career, that they are valued. And to me, this means not being taken for granted. Because like a lot of women that I speak to, they feel like their roles or their place in society is just taken for granted. And I don't want people to feel that way. And I want them to feel like they have just as much right to pursue a career that they love or want, or any personal aspiration that they have, as much as their male counterparts. Many women I speak to on a daily basis don't have main character energy in their life. And if you want to talk about main character energy, I actually did a podcast on this, and I will link it in the show notes as well, because that podcast actually has been a topic of conversation for many of my new clients that I have. And they say they heard that podcast and they're then speaking to me about it. And so, yeah, it's maybe a good one to start with as well. So in the workforce, it looks like being given exactly the same opportunity as men and the same level of respect as men. And it looks like in the household, equal responsibilities for child rearing and household duties. That's the bare basics of it. So it's a big topic, hey? And I have to say a scary topic, because there's so much varying opinions and, to be honest, a lot of pushback and misunderstanding about this topic. And my friends, I'm just going to make a confession with you. This topic is not something that I feel comfortable talking about. And it is something that I want to change in my own life. And having this conversation, oh man, it has brought up a lot of, I just want to say, limiting beliefs for myself. And I know they're there, and yet I'm still working on them. And I'm going to be brave enough to bring this conversation to you, because I know it's so important. I know it's so important for many women to hear this conversation coming from another woman that just seems like them. That is my duty to you. That's what I'm bringing to you today by having this conversation. But I want you to know that I haven't learnt the skill yet about inclusion and about how to use the language correctly, or to even how to show up in the world doing the things right that will make a change. That's just the bare basics of what I want you to know, that I'm not perfect. I don't know a lot about this topic yet, but I'm willing to find out, and I'm willing to go there with you so you can actually start this journey for yourself. So when I was thinking about doing this topic and I started to do research, because believe me, I have done a lot of research, the topic of inclusion in context to International Women's Day crosses over with feministic views, okay? And as a feminist, I'm proud to say I'm a feminist. Like, I'm not a very articulate feminist yet, but I'm working on it. I need to say this. International Women's Day often highlights both inclusion and feminist principles, and it's essential to recognise that they are not exactly the same thing, but can be closely interconnected. So International Women's Day celebrates the achievements and progress made in advancing women's rights. Fantastic. And both inclusion and feminism play a significant role in this celebration. So I just want you to hear that, because a lot of people get repelled by the term feminism and being a feminist. They think about the burning the bras and, completely going against the whole grain of society and, having lots of radical views. And I just want to tell you that that's not always the case, and we need to weave it into our life about how it feels good for us, and just giving you that perspective that inclusion and feminism have similar views and they support each other is really important. So I just needed to tell you that. And a little bit more information. Inclusion focuses on creating an environment where women feel valued, respected, and have equal opportunities, which is exactly why we're having this conversation. But it extends beyond gender and it embraces all diversity in all forms. So inclusion as a whole, that's what that looks like, while feminism specifically addresses the advocacy for women's rights and equality. So during International Women's Day, of course, feminist perspectives may be highlighted, emphasising the ongoing fight for women's rights and addressing gender-based discrimination, but we're looking at it as a whole. Like, yes, we're advocating for women on International Women's Day. We want to really acknowledge women, and we want inclusion as a whole. It's not just about women ruling and being equal. It's about everybody being equal, and that's the difference, I suppose. So I just needed to give you clarification around that. Now, I want you to take a moment to reflect. Have you ever caught yourself conforming or perpetuating gender stereotypes? Like, really, have you even thought about it? Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't thought about it. But I know I have, and there is this subtle influence that can seep into our daily lives without us even realizing it. And so, again, another reason why this conversation is so important. I want to give you some examples here, because sometimes sentences like that make no sense to somebody that's just starting this journey or doesn't want to hear it, I suppose. So the question was, have you caught yourself conforming or perpetuating gender stereotypes? That's the question. And now I want to give you some examples, like real life examples. And it's all about awareness, because as you know, awareness is key to change and growth. So we have to become aware of what we're doing or not doing, and then we can choose whether we want to change it or not. So let's talk about these examples. And there's a huge big list, so bear with me. This one's particularly speaking to the women that are parents and in a relationship and like have children, because you're parents, obviously. So did you ever have a conversation about who was going to be the primary parent of your children? Most probably not. I can pretty much guarantee the majority of people who have children have never had a conversation with their partner to talk about, hey, who's going to stay home and look after these children once I birth them? And I'm not sure if you're the same, but I've actually had judgment of people in the past, and this is definitely in the past because it's not something that I have judgment on now, but it was just from my upbringing and my own perspective. When I initially saw women who were going back to work so early after having children, I was judging them. And so that was a gender stereotype because I believed that women should stay home with their children. I no longer believe that, by the way, but that is just an example of how that can happen. So if you're in a relationship, you have children, just think back. Did you ever have a conversation with your partner about who was going to raise the children primarily? It's the assumption that women are naturally better caregivers and should be the primary caretakers of children, reinforcing that typical gender role, within the family unit. So if that's happening, that might be something that is just in your awareness now. If you're listening to this and you're pregnant or you're planning on having children with somebody in the future, maybe it's a conversation that you need to have. The next thing is, in your relationship, do you find yourself being the primary person doing most of the household labour? Think of cooking dinner, shopping for the food, cleaning the house, paying all the bills. Maybe paying the bills is separate, but doing all those household chores. This also supports the belief that women are the sole people responsible for domestic chores, reinforcing the idea that these tasks are inherently feminine. So again, another gender stereotype. So are you that person? And I'm just going to put my hand up and go, yeah, I was that person up until very recently, until I realized that I didn't want that anymore. And another example is, do you say things to yourself or others like, well, I'm happy to get up 5 times a night to tend to the baby because my husband works? For somebody that does that, you have all the justifications in the world why you do it. And I get it, I know. But not only does this directly support the bias that women should be the primary caregivers for children, but it can also affect your career choices. It might mean that you're giving up your career to raise children, and maybe you'll never go back to that career. And then thinking about career, it actually feels very normal, wouldn't you agree, that women pursue more nurturing and caregiving professions? Think of nursing or teaching, family daycare, that type of stuff, while men are expected to take on more leadership roles in more technical fields, like in mining and mechanical engineering, all those types of things. They seem to be more male orientated, and women are often ferried into more feminine roles and careers. I don't know how many times my grandmother asked me, or asked all of us grandkids, who was going to be a hairdresser. She had lots of daughters and granddaughters, and nobody's a hairdresser. She was just doing it to support her own need, and this is what we're trying to change when we're talking about inclusion. Another example is leadership perception, and this sort of flows on from the career options. The stereotypes that women are less capable or less effective leaders than men, which is definitely a stereotype out there, can hinder their advancement in professional careers. It's no surprise that there's 10% of women in leadership roles within the Fortune 500 companies in the US. These are the statistics. It's women aren't as prevalent in leadership roles as men, and we're trying to close that gap by having these conversations. Because I want to ask you, have you ever felt more inclined to vote or to listen to a man on a topic, especially if it's a male-dominated topic, and vote for that person or side with that person's opinion for no apparent reason other than they are a man? I know I have done that. Didn't know why that I was doing that, but it was this underlying gender stereotype and gender bias that was actually driving it. So these are the questions that we can start asking ourselves. And I just want you to understand and remember that I'm asking you to reflect on these, and it's not from a place of judgment or judgment on your character. Absolutely not. It is literally just asking you to reflect so you can grow personally and, use it for a piece of growth. I say it all the time and use the quote, we are 100% of the people that we can control. So when we can control ourselves and understand ourselves really well, we can then make changes for society and for the community and for our families that are beneficial. So that's why I'm asking you these questions. It is not because there is judgment behind it. And if you feel like you've got judgment for yourself, this is just another reflection piece, okay? So just lean in and feel how you're feeling through this conversation. Okay, so here's one that you might just do without even thinking. And that is, do you find yourself pursuing beauty standards that are not always for you, but to maintain a standard for society or for your partner? And it can be things like simple things that you just do without even thinking, like colouring your hair. Maybe you're going grey and you'd love just to go grey because you could not be bothered, or you don't want to spend the money on colouring your hair, but you feel like you should. You feel like it would offend people if you didn't colour your hair. And look, we've got so much evidence of this out in the world, how much of the beauty standards are set and that we have to just fall in line with. Maybe it's more than colouring your hair. Maybe it's just shaving your legs. Like, I've spent my whole life shaving my legs. And then I look at other women that don't shave their legs and I think to myself, wow, liberation right there, because shaving your legs is a pain. Who wants a shaving rash? And to take it a step further, maybe you're getting Brazilians. Maybe you're, doing all the things downstairs where you're actually like making things look better for somebody else. Because I can guarantee you, we're not looking at ourselves thinking, oh, that looks so much better. We just don't. We do it for somebody else. We do it to maintain a beauty standard set by society and set by the men in our lives. This beauty standard can even go further, and it can be the reasons why we push ourselves to be thinner, to dress a certain way, and to uphold the standards of what we should look like at a certain age. It is why the whole beauty industry exists. It's why plastic surgery exists, is to conform to a societal standard of what should be, what women should look like. Okay? So maybe that's what you do. Maybe you don't even know you're doing that, but maybe that's what you're doing. Okay, so here's another stereotype that women are boxed into, and that's being emotional. Women are generally looked at as being more emotional than men. This can actually lead to a dismissal of our opinions because of our feelings, because we're showing our feelings, that we're overly sensitive and irrational. This is what women get labelled with all the time. And it does go both ways, because we also believe, there's a belief out in the world that men who cry are weak. Okay? But women who don't cry are cold. So have you found yourself ever thinking this way? Have you ever found yourself suppressing your emotions because you don't want to seem irrational? I know I have. Just recently I've let loose, and I'm not doing that anymore. I even find myself sometimes saying, oh, don't mind me, I'm just being silly, when I'm having an emotion. Seriously, I'm saying these words, because this happened just this week, and I'm saying these words and I'm thinking, I don't think it's silly, but I still say that to appease somebody else's feelings who are around me. Interesting, hey? Maybe you dismiss the argument of a female because she expresses it with emotion, and take a man more seriously because he can more logically analyse something without emotion. This is a big one for me again. So if you find yourself dismissing people that are emotional with their emotions and listening to people that can be more logical and unemotional, maybe you're buying into the gender stereotype, and therefore you're not being inclusive. Maybe it's more simple things. We've touched on a lot of those big things, but maybe it is more simple things like mechanical skills. It's the assumption that women are less proficient in mechanical or technical skills, which therefore just perpetuates the idea that certain professions or hobbies are better suited to men, and therefore women get left out of them, are not in the running. Have a look at the mechanical field. It's just filled with men. Why is that? Because it has always been that way. And there's a big trend of tradie women coming up, which I'm really excited about, because tradies can be women too. And I know in the mining sector there's this huge push to employ more women, and they actually say that women are better drivers at those big vehicles because they've got more attention to detail. So when we're not including women in many professions and in many aspects of just general life, we're actually missing a huge part of the benefits of having women in these roles. So that's the big push why we need to change. And here's a big one. This one is a big one for me, okay? And it's that automatically you give away your financial independence when you become connected to somebody. So as a woman, when you get married, you give away all your financial independence. It's the expectation that women should rely on men for financial support. And I know that on the other side of that, it's the pressure for the men to actually be the financial support. I get that, but we're not talking about that side today. I'm talking about the inclusion for women. And when we take away all financial independence for a woman, it leads to unequal power dynamics in relationships and in households. And that, my friend, is never good. Someone close to me just recently said, "Who has the most money has all the power." And look, it's a common ideology that comes from men. Men think that money is power because it seems that way in the world at the moment. So you can imagine if you grow up with somebody that has that view, how possibly you could be oppressed if you're a woman and don't have access to financial independence. Okay, so this one particularly hits home for me because all too often I see the fallout when relationships break down and people break up, and it has left the woman financially bereft. Like they have no access to financial independence anymore. Before they met this person and they got married and before they had children and committed their life to their family, they did have access to financial independence. But over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, if that relationship breaks up, usually the woman has no super. Usually she hasn't got any skills anymore that can go out into the workforce to create the money that she needs to survive. And these women are just so financially broken. You know, we know the stats on homelessness, and older women are more likely to be homeless because of this fact after breaking up from relationships that they have been supported financially through their whole adult lives, and then they're left with nothing. It breaks my heart because I see so many people going through this, which is why I'm so passionate about helping women find their independence and really knowing their worth and like showing up and keeping themselves on track to be independent, and especially financially independent. Like, I'm very passionate about this. And then there are other types of biases that have been weaved into society that you might not even think affects you. And this can be things like sports and physical abilities. Okay, so it's the belief that women are not skilled as the men and not as competitive in sports as men. And this leads to less support and recognition of female athletes. Over the last decade, this actually has started to really bug me. And yeah, there's been plenty of conversations in my life around this topic, and the men in my life just don't seem to get it. They're focused on the money, okay? They're focused on, well, men bring in more crowds and in bigger paychecks for the companies that run these sporting events. But I'm like, yeah, but we haven't had the opportunity yet to actually be at the same level as you, so we still need the support to get there. They just sort of brush it off, and it really bugs me. Like, it bugs me to my core that this conversation is still happening and people don't get it. And it might be something that you've never even thought about, you don't even care about, but it's a big thing. And as you know, women's sport is really changing. It's starting to be really brought to the forefront now, and I'm really excited about that. Really, really super excited. We just need to get women's sport paid like the men now. That's the aim. Okay, so then I've got this last one, which is the communication style. So you, again, might have never thought about this, but I have women that come to me and they're being assertive in their careers, they're speaking up, and they are being shot down, and they're being told they're too emotional and they haven't got any tact and that they're cold. While in the same situation, men are doing the exact same thing, but they're like, that's great, they're being assertive. But women don't seem to be able to be assertive in the workforce as men do. So the stereotype is that women are more nurturing and communal in their communication. So we have to be all kind and soft and softly spoken and sort of a roundabout, but men can be direct and straight to the point and quite abrupt and still get the respect that they need. But women, if we do that, we actually lose respect. So this can result in their ideas being overlooked, especially if we're being soft and kind and nurturing. We can be overlooked for professions, and especially in academic settings and in workplaces and in leadership roles, we are overlooked because of that. So that's the last gender stereotype that I'm going to talk about as an example. So all these stereotypes definitely have real world consequences because it influences societal expectations. It limits opportunities for women and it contributes to gender-based discrimination, which is why on this one day that we get throughout the whole calendar year, we are having this conversation. And I get to openly break down these stereotypes, and it's crucial because fostering a more inclusive and equitable society is why ultimately I do this work. And if you were to talk to any of these women that have had a conversation about these gender stereotypes with me, they would tell you that it gets a rise out of me every single time. Every time they bring up any inequality in their relationship or workplace, it's safe to say that I am in the fight for inclusion for women in all aspects, but particularly in personal lives. It gets me fired up, and I start to become less of a coach and more of an advocate. And I'm actually really proud of myself for that. I'm not letting these things slide past anymore. If someone brings something like that to me, I'm going to make them aware how that is a gender bias or a stereotype that they need to be aware of and choose, like, because they get to choose if they want to change it in their relationship or their personal experience. But I really want them to see it. Most women just don't see it. Because what usually happens is the women that bring these topics to me, usually they're going through all the emotions of guilt and unworthiness and self-doubt, and they think it's about them. They think it's something that they've done wrong. And I want to highlight to every single one of these women that come to me with this, or if you're even just listening to this podcast, that you are doing nothing wrong. The emotions that you are feeling aren't about yourself. It's actually about the stereotype that's out in the world that you're pushing against. And yeah, most people don't have these conversations, and I want to be the one that has these conversations with you. And who am I to talk about this? Because like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, I'm no expert. I don't have the language around this yet, and I find it really frigging uncomfortable to have this conversation with you, in all honesty. But as a woman that has tried to do it all, and I would use the word tried very intentionally, and I'm talking about being a mother, being a homemaker, being the cook, the cleaner, the business owner, a work colleague, a friend. It feels bloody impossible most of the time. Like, honestly, it does. It doesn't get easier. And yeah, just to say that out loud actually is really, really nice, because there's so much out in the world to say that you can have it all. And yeah, you can. But are you bloody exhausted? Most probably. And many women are burning out trying to have it all. And yeah, so something's got to give. And you know what? I'm not willing to give up my dreams for anything else, to hold a stereotype. I get to choose my life, and that's really the message that I want for you too. I want you to choose your life. And look, you can have it all, or you can really figure out what's important to you and go after that instead. There was something that I said last week to my husband, and it was a little bit shocking to myself. Might have even been shocking to Joel. I had no idea. He didn't really make any comment on it. But for a bit of context, I was having a moment of internal failure. Like, I was in my head about a lot of stuff. I had a lot of doubt. This was definitely caused because I had been sick and I was exhausted. And so definitely that was the trigger. And what I said was, I don't know why I'm working so hard for what seems like little reward. That's what I said. And I then continued to say, I could have, all these years that I've been busting my ass, because when I think back on my life, I've been doing a lot. Like, there's been lots of things that I have been doing simultaneously with being a mother and being the housekeeper and being the cook and all that type of stuff, doing all the domestic labour. And I think all these years I have been doing all this other stuff, working and growing businesses, but I could have just stayed home and done one job and done that job well, rather than breaking myself into 1,000 pieces and stretching myself thin and potentially doing everything poorly. That was my mindset last week. And I bet you've also had this thought as well. It's like, why am I bothering? What is the point of really pushing the needle and pushing myself through trying to make some headway, and it feels like I'm just on the wheel, spinning around and not getting anywhere, and potentially being a bad mum, potentially being a bad business owner, potentially being a bad wife, housekeeper, all the above, not doing anything well, like I said. And that, my friends, is the truth of this fight of inclusion. And it is ultimately why I want to keep fighting it. As much as I felt deflated last week when I said that comment, it is really the reason why I want to keep going. Because it makes me question, why as a woman do I have to be everything? Why is it my job to be the best mum and the best homemaker, all while contributing like financially to my household? The comparison is real. We as women are statistically shown to do more unpaid work and domestic labour than our male counterparts. And I was sure to look this up before I jumped on this podcast in my research. And according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, less than half of males, so that's 42%, spend time on housework, compared to 70% of females. That is massive. That's a lot. That's a big difference. And people wonder why we want to close this gap. And on average, women spend 4.5 hours daily doing unpaid work, while men contribute 3 hours and 15 minutes of unpaid work daily. Also, an hour and 15-minute gap. So that's a big gap. I also want to close that gap on the respect women don't receive from their domestic work and their child rearing. Because I have struggled to articulate this my whole life, the lack of validation of all the effort that I have put in to raise my children. Just take a breath. Okay. I'm going to start the sentence again, because as I was speaking just now, you can still hear it in my voice. I have struggled to articulate this my whole life. And that's the lack of validation of all the effort that I put in to raise my children, or our children, and to keep things running and to feel like I am important in my relationship, in my family life. And I know many of you feel this too. We have really put in so much effort to raise incredible humans and do all the things that are required to help others have a great life, and we are often forgotten about. And yeah, it's really hard realization to have, right? You might be listening to this thinking that this is a load of BS, like get over yourself, Prue. or you could be really feeling this with me right now. I know I talk about validating yourself, and I'm great at that. Believe me, I'm great. And it is time to validate the women in our life about how bloody amazing they are at doing all the things that we do. And I really want you to hear this. If you've got a woman in your life right now, I want you to pick up the phone, send them an email, send them a text message, and just say thanks. Thanks for all the things that you do. You make my life easier, because that's what we do. As a woman that is the primary carer and the woman that is running everything for everybody, we make your life easier. But on the other side, we don't feel so good a lot of the time. Okay, so that was a little tough segment to have, but I'm going to move on. To help with this, it's really important to find people that support your new ideas and to help articulate things. And I was actually lucky enough to have some incredible people around me, but there was one woman that I found on TikTok, of all places. I know. I love TikTok because it actually has people just really expressing and articulating the realness in life. And yeah, that's why I keep going back to that app. And there's a particular lady, and she goes under the name Hope Peddler, and I will link her in the show notes. And she has given me the validation that I need to justify my feelings around this. It's not just me feeling this way. And the feelings I'm referring to are feelings of resentment and frustration, self-doubt, fear, loneliness. There are a lot of women that are feeling these feelings in everyday life. And sometimes we don't think we're justified at feeling these feelings. But if you're feeling them, there is justification around them. And Hope Peddler on TikTok, she can help you understand. Like, she talks about this stuff a lot. And there's plenty of others too. So once you find her, maybe in your For You feed, they'll pop up other women. And she also stitches other people as well. So it helps to expand your knowledge. But knowledge is definitely power in this regard, because the more that you know, the more that you can learn and start speaking up about it. So Hope has actually decided not to have children, and because she looked out into the world and she saw the evidence supporting the life that she wanted to live wasn't conducive and able to be managed to have children as well. So she concluded that having kids is not possible yet for her to be able to live the life that she wants and to have children simultaneously. And look, every woman that's listening to this that has children and also dreams, we understand, like, we get it. I've often said that in my next life I'm not going to have children, and I tell you what, the looks I get from people when I say that, like, I get this weird look, like the ungrateful look basically, or the surprised look, and it's like I'm undermining the life that I have now, because I love my life, I love my kids, I love my family, and there is also a struggle. I'm not going to give up what I've got. Yet it's interesting just listening to people like Hope and making conclusions and making decisions that I never knew I had. And that is what I want for you. I want you to know that you've got choices and that you can make decisions that are for you. And yeah, there is lots of justification behind it and evidence why you would feel that way. So where do you fit in here? I'm going to take you back to that very first question that I asked you before we started this conversation, and that is, have you caught yourself conforming to or perpetuating gender stereotypes? And I'm interested to know right now, we're just going to have a check-in, and did anything come up for you? Did you go, oh my God, yes, that's happening? Or no, I'm still, thinking about it. And that's fine. Wherever you're at, that is fine. And again, I want to be clear that I'm still learning about this topic, this huge topic, what I have learned about myself is that this topic is the only topic that gets me fired up to my core. Never in my life have I had such a visceral reaction to a topic, which means this is my work. And I'm still haven't committed to it 100%, but I know it's coming. And I still find it frustrating because I'm yet to have the language to support it and to share my experiences in a way to understand it and so I can create change. So I suppose I'm just in the learning process, just as you might be, because I need to tell you something. And I only share this because you also might be like me and this may help you feel less alone. I still worry about speaking up because I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to offend the men in my life, and some women as well that don't see the same views as I see. So a lot of the time I do stay quiet. I'm still here though. I'm still here and still learning to voice my opinions, and I'm still learning to speak in a way that is influential and not just in a way that is resentful and angry. Because sometimes when I get that fired up feeling, I can feel the anger come up, and therefore I don't make a great point because I'm just fueled by anger, and therefore it just like perpetuates the cycle that women are emotional and they shouldn't really be listened to. Like I said, it's my work, it's part of my work anyway, to learn to articulate myself and to gather the language and the evidence I need so I have some rebuttals for some of the things that come up in my life. Because believe me, there are plenty of times when I just want to say to somebody, fuck off. Seriously. Have you ever had that as well? But you don't. You stay quiet because we're good girls, right? We just stay quiet. And there's so many times I just don't want to justify myself and just tell them to fuck off. And I just don't want to have the conversation. It's like, I'm right, this is my opinion, I don't want to talk any more about it, but I know that's not how you make changes in the long run. So I'm determined to make a big change, therefore I need to be also determined to educate myself, and that's what I'm going to do. And again, I share this only because it might help you as well. So on to the next part. I know this podcast is a long episode and I might have lost you already, and that's totally fine. But if you're still here, I now want to just step through some things that have helped me start this process, because you might be at the beginning stage where you're like, oh, I haven't spoken up about anything. And I just want to share my experience about how I question myself in certain circumstances and then do things differently in my action line so I can create change in my life. And this is just for reflection for you, so it can help you do the same thing. So the questions I often ask myself when I get that visceral reaction is, what is it that bothers me so much about this topic? Like, it's a really great question. Really ask yourself immediately to understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Because like I said, if it comes out as anger and without much evidence, it can be dismissed really easily. So to be heard, we have to have some great language and some great skills at communicating. So another question that you can ask yourself is, am I willing to change this in myself? Because sometimes it's just a reflection of us, why we're feeling the feeling. And another question is this about me or about someone else? Okay, can you see a bit of a theme here with these questions? And whatever comes to mind when you're answering your own questions, because you have to ask the question, but then you have to answer it. You can't leave it unanswered. You have to answer it. And any answer that you get back, I really want you to be open and compassionate here. This is the part where you really need to be compassionate with yourself and understanding. Okay, so you're not asking yourself so you can judge yourself. You're asking yourself and you're giving yourself compassion to figure it out so that you can make different choices, potentially. Then you can test it out in the real world. So that might be like the internal process. And now something's happened in your life. There's a circumstance and you have time and a space to test out some new actions that are going to make the changes long term and change small pieces by small pieces at a time. So for the example, this is so small, but I know it's going to be relevant, so I'm going to share it anyway. So maybe your kids always look to you and ask you, hey mum, what's for dinner? Mum, where's the washing? Have you washed my socks? Whatever the case may be, like something so minute, okay? And because we're doing something different, you might say to them, maybe dad can organise that for you. Or maybe just ask dad and redirect it to somebody else rather than you always taking on that burden and being that person. Okay? Like I know when I leave the house and my husband's home, my kids will ring me, even if I'm working, and say, Mum, hey, what's for lunch? And I'm like, kids, dad's home, ask him. But it's just me as the primary carer, so that's why they do that. And it's nobody's fault, but we are allowed to change it. And then there's another example, and this is about our children and how we parent our children. So I know I have this unconscious expectation on my children because of their genders. Look, I'm not proud of it, but I'm just being honest with you. It's not so much anymore, but I'm still doing it in certain circumstances in my life for sure. So to change big picture stuff, I need to change these tiny little things as well. You see, I expect the girls, like I've got 2 girls, to cook and clean more. Like I absolutely do. And that's pretty shit, I know. And yeah, maybe you feel this as well. So now I'm making sure that I actually ask my son as much as my daughters to do these requests, to cook and to clean. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable. I know I let my son off the hook so much more in this regard than I do my girls. Yeah, like I said, it's shit, doesn't mean it's good, but it's something that I'm aware of and I'm willing to change. So I'm just asking my son to do equal share in this stuff. And as I was writing these notes about this episode, I actually realised it goes the other way too. So I've only taught my son, well, I've got my husband to teach my son how to mow and whippersnip the front lawn. And I'm thinking to myself, right, well, if it goes both ways, I now also have to teach my daughter to mow and whippersnip the front lawn as well. Okay? It goes both ways. Another area that I'm working on in myself, and you can too, which is really small but huge at the same time, is feeling emotions properly. And for myself, I've been feeling a lot of emotions recently, and instead of bottling them up, which I have been doing for 40 years, like literally have been doing my whole life. A lot of people would have told me that I was quite cold in my younger years. So what I'm doing consciously is now shifting my belief away from the stereotype that emotions are weaknesses, which is what I thought because I was embarrassed to show my emotions around people because it made me feel less worthy, and yeah, so it was just easy to keep my emotions bottled up. So now I'm just being more emotional around people. I'm feeling a broad spectrum of emotions in front of people and I'm being okay with it. Okay, I'm just processing it through like I normally would by myself, but I can do it openly in front of other people as well now. Like particularly my husband. Like it's totally fine that I can cry in front of my husband or in front of anybody. Okay, so if you see me crying, you know that's what's going on. Even on this podcast, I just cried and I would never, ever leave that in. But in this particular episode, I've chosen to leave it in because I think it's a really important step into this liberation and to doing something differently. And I need to tell you a funny story actually, and this happened just today. It's so timely and I love it and I have to share it. It's an example of starting a new perspective and shifting identities. Okay, so it's these little things that make big changes. So my husband has worked from home for the last couple of years, like he flies in, flies out. So he's home for half of the time and he started making the kids' lunches. Hallelujah, it's been great. I love it. They love it too. But today he made the kids' lunches, and when I dropped them to school on the way back, I get a phone call and it's from Joel. And he says, the kids forgot to take their lunch. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sucks. Like, it sucks for both the kids and the parent who put in the effort. Like, totally sucks, right? But it was this comment that made me smile the most. And I know it sounds terrible that I'm smiling, but he said, I don't know why I bother. And I just laughed and I said to him, welcome to my last 20 years. Like, seriously. In the past, I wouldn't have made that comment because I wouldn't have wanted to share my own grievance with him because it seems like I was whinging, right? And maybe it would even get him defensive, but not anymore. Like, I literally said that comment because it's how I felt and it's how it is. You know, as somebody that has done the lunches for the last 20 years and definitely have lunches come back uneaten, unopened, unappreciated for 20 years, to have someone say that, and I'm like, yeah, welcome to my world, buddy, welcome to my world. And it's totally fine that I bring it up, and I'm not making a dig at him, I'm not shaming him, but I'm actually highlighting the work. Well, he was highlighting the work and effort that I have put in over the years that have gone unnoticed. It's just a little sweet symphony, don't you think? So speak up. Don't hold back. You can definitely do it respectfully, and you can definitely do it not respectfully either. You choose how you want to show up and to highlight these things. Sometimes a shake up is required. Sometimes you have to make people feel something that they haven't felt before to get your point across, and it's totally okay. This is also the part that can feel really icky to me. You know, I confessed earlier that I have trouble speaking up, and again, it's really important to speak up because this is then undermining the whole label that women are whingers and naggers. Okay, and this comment really makes me tense up, but it is the reason we don't stand up for ourselves in these situations, or the reasons that we don't praise ourselves for the work that we do because of how we will be labelled. Nobody likes a person praising themselves, apparently, so we need to undo that part because, look, we need to praise ourselves. If we're not getting validation from others, we need to give it to ourselves, and that if that means openly doing it in front of others, so be it. Wow, this has been a huge conversation and one that I'm really proud that I have had with you today. So we're going to wrap up soon, and I just want to tell you that we've all, and I've personally encountered situations where stereotypes were just accepted, and it took a conscious effort to question and challenge them. And I gave you some really great small examples in my own life that you are possibly experiencing as well. So I just want you to keep challenging them. I want you to keep stepping into the awareness around it and to know that it's an ongoing process, and each small step counts because it's the consistency of change that will get you the big changes. It's not the big, huge things. It's the small, simple steps that are taken daily to make these big, huge changes. And this conversation is not about men versus women. Absolutely not. It's in regards to recognizing this day, International Women's Day. It's about everybody having the same opportunity, inclusivity, the same opportunity to thrive, the same opportunity to choose and to be rewarded as equals, irrespective of gender. That's why we've had this conversation today. Being aware of the stereotypes around us is the first step, and it's the first step to break free from the grip of gender bias. It's all about empowering ourselves and others to question assumptions and to redefine what's possible for individuals, for society, and for the world. Absolutely. So here's the challenge for you, my friend. I want you to be on the lookout for these subtle stereotypes in your own thoughts and your own conversations and actions. When you spot them, I want you to question them. I want you to challenge them. And we do this because it's the small acts of defiance that we do that pave the way for a more inclusive world. We want everybody to be included. And for this episode, I have actually created a one-page PDF for you, and it has some prompts to help. And if you want it, you can just find it in the link in the show notes, and you can just go in and download it and it'll be delivered to your inbox. But on there, what it's going to teach you is 3 things. So the first one is reflect on assumptions. The second one is evaluate language and labels. And the third one is examine decision-making patterns. So it'll give you a couple of prompts for each. So for example, the reflect on assumption, it says, ask yourself, in my daily life, do I unconsciously make assumptions about people based on gender? And then the challenge is, take a moment to reflect on any perceived notions you might have and consider where they come from. Are these assumptions limiting someone's potential or contributing to inequality? So that's the first one, and then there's 2 more. So please go in, grab the PDF, download it, and start using it. Start using it on a daily basis just to prompt you into pushing yourself through this information and to make these changes. By doing this, we're learning to celebrate and challenge the status quo. That's what we're doing. Whether it's in the workplace, at home, or within your community, it's like shining a light on breaking free of these stereotypes. So as we wrap up this episode, remember that challenging stereotypes and understanding inclusion isn't about being confrontational. That's not the point. It's about fostering understanding and creating a space where everybody feels seen and heard and valued. I want you to feel seen and heard and valued, and it's something that people often tell me that they don't feel. So this is why we need to do this work. And to finish, I'm going to leave you with some new sentences to practice. Remember back when I first started this podcast, I was leaving you with a new sentence to practice every week. Well, I'm going back there, and they come directly from the International Women's Day website. It's part of their resources section, and they were prompt cards that you can download. So you might see them on my socials because I'm going to put out a few over the next couple of weeks. But these 4 are my favourite, and I know I'm going to be practicing and leaning into these 4 and saying them on a daily basis, reminding myself that this is my mission and what I'm doing, and changing my mind and changing my mindset around how to make these changes in my real life. Because we can't just say something once and think it's going to just magically happen. We have to practice it. So these are the prompts for you. And if you want them, and if you want these prompt cards, I'll also link the International Women's Day website in the show notes so you can go find them for yourself. And maybe you want to put them on your own social media in support of this conversation and in support of this really special day. So here are the 4 prompts. The first one is, I will challenge gender stereotypes, discrimination, and biases. I will forge positive visibility of women. I will celebrate women's achievements. I will call out gendered actions or assumptions. Let's say them again. I will challenge gender stereotypes, discrimination, and bias. I will forge positive visibility of women. I will celebrate women's achievements. And I will call out gendered actions or assumptions. Okay, my friends, I hope this has landed for you. I hope this conversation has been helpful. Go out, be amazing, and I'll see you next week. Go celebrate all the amazing women in your life. Have a great day. Bye.